What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Manji TV. On today's episode, we've actually got quite an interesting one for you. Haven't done one of these in a really long time. It's quite rare that we actually get a customer that wants to do this. This is a BMW 128 with the M54 engine, and we're going to be doing a 3-stage intake manifold. This has the standard 2-stage, so we'll be pulling off this intake manifold and installing our new, to us, we have a nice stage 3 intake manifold here that we're going to be installing with some new diesel valves and whatnot. So the main process here, you're probably going to have to pull this engine cover and then just start getting into the intake boxes and getting all that intake tract out, any vacuum lines that are connected to that, and then start taking the intake manifold off. So enough said, let's get to it. Alright guys, this thing was a pain in the butt. This wiring harness bracket was super rusted together and wouldn't come off, as well as, you can see here how rusty it is, as well as the connector for this little thing was really hard to get off, and the one on the back of the head actually was so hard it broke. So just be careful when you're taking this stuff off. There are quite a few connectors hiding, and it really is kind of a pain in the butt, but we're going to go ahead, lift this bad boy up, and get the new intake in. Take this bracket off too. This connector is stuck back here. Nope. We're going to pull that through. The factory intake manifold removed. We're going to go ahead, get this oil filter housing off, get this oil filter housing gasket replaced. As you can see here, everything is a freaking mess in here from it. We'll go ahead and try and clean that up as best as possible. Wipe down the mating surface here for the intake manifold gaskets and plop that new intake in. Double check everything is good, all these connectors are good, and nothing's broken or damaged. Alright guys, we got the oil filter housing off. We've cleaned the mating surface. We're going to go ahead and clean the oil filter housing. We're going to try and clean as much of this oil down in here as possible, but it's pretty bad. It's a lot of the stuff's overdue. As you can see here, the Mickey Mouse hose is completely shot, broke off, as usual, always does. Got some new gaskets here, a new Mickey Mouse hose, and some other stuff coming like throttle body gaskets. Our new stage 3 intake manifold, wherever it is right here, basically ready to be reassembled. We're just waiting on this hose. We'll be replacing that and then getting this thing all back together. All right guys, we went ahead and cleaned the oil filter housing super good. Everything's looking beautiful. We did our best to clean the surface and surrounding areas, but honestly, it's a real mess. So we're gonna go ahead and get this bad boy on, get it torqued to 22 foot-pounds, or 22 newton meters, my bad. And yeah, keep moving on, getting this Mickey Mouse hose. Alright guys, things really snowballed. Ended up noticing that the radiator was leaking quite profusely, and there was also a leak coming from the thermostat, and so contacted the customer. He's opted to do new radiator, water pump, thermostat, and every single coolant line. So we're going to be taking out these heater core lines. I kind of bummed now because we have the intake manifold back in, and it would have been way easier with the intake manifold out, but nonetheless, we're going to be going ahead getting all of these heater core lines replaced. Radiator, the crossover plastic tube, which is also kind of like goes to the thermostat. It also goes to the reservoir, upper radiator hose, lower radiator hose, sensors. Well guys, this sure has snowballed. Went ahead and pulled the crank pulley off just to take a look at the crank seal. As you guys can see there's a lot of oil coming through it. I also found this belt strap, which is from a belt getting pulled off and sucked through the crank pulley. You can also see the crank pulley's been like sucked in and kind of damaged. Obviously there was a massive leak before we did the oil filter housing gasket, so I'm gonna go ahead and clean this up. We're now doing literally the whole cooling system, everything from the water pump, thermostat, radiator, hoses, you name it, because every single hose I started taking off would either break or was about to break. And because of this crank issue, we're gonna go ahead and be pulling the oil pan now. So this thing has really snowballed. So this has turned into a 3-stage intake manifold video with basically a full reseal of the engine, oil filter housing, front main seal, oil pan, and whatnot. We're gonna be going ahead and addressing this oil pan next. I'm gonna get the motor mounts undone. I'm debating on whether I want to completely pull it down or just leave it hanging in the car. I prefer usually to pull it all the way down just so I can work nicely on the oil pan, especially because it's just me. For the sake of time, I may just leave it in the car hanging by the control arms. We got to go ahead and pull the wheels off. I'll probably pull the sway bar completely out of the way. We'll see. You guys will find out. I may or may not pull it all the way down, but anyways, there's 6 bolts down the side. You got to pull the control arms if you do want to pull the whole thing. I like to pull the rack and pinion completely out of the way. Leave that with the engine so that you don't have to drain it. Quick look at the mess of stuff everywhere. So we're probably doing a quick tidy up. Carnage everywhere. Coolant leaks everywhere. Hope you guys can see all that green gunk from the coolant leaking. So anyhow, we're gonna make this 128 one nice 128. Once it's all done, we'll power wash this subframe in the front of the engine and whatnot. So. Alright guys, so I tried to end up taking the subframe out, but honestly every piece of hardware on this thing has basically been stuck, and the steering shaft very stuck, which is keeping me from getting the steering rack off. I've been soaking it, I was hammering on it, could not get the steering shaft off the actual rack and pinion, so that's a problem. We're going to be just leaving this thing in the car due to that, and doing the oil pan. As you can see, it's already coming out here in the car, just with the subframe in. Some of the control arms have been loosened just to get a little more slack. This is basically as far as we can come down. I should be able to get it without much issue here. It's gonna be a little hard just by myself getting around the oil pump and whatnot for sake of this customer. So yeah, let's go ahead and get it down. We'll get it cleaned up real nice and get it put back on, and then we'll work on cleaning the front of the motor. All right guys, so as we expected, I actually did see some, there's some belt material here in the oil pan. We're gonna drain it and see how bad it is, but I can see, doesn't seem to be too bad. Oh no, it's actually pretty bad. There's definitely some belt material sucked up in the oil pan, and so it's really a good thing that we pulled this. Hopefully there's been no damage done to the engine. It seemed to run fine pulling in here. It's been a pain in the butt with just everything super dirty and super rusty, but here we are. We're gonna go ahead, get this oil pan clean, get the gasket swapped out, clean out all of the stuff out of the pickup. Luckily there is a screen in there, so the chances of it getting beyond the pickup are slim. Check all the timing components and make sure there's nothing bound up in here. Usually it just gets shredded to pieces, which I can see. There has been a little bit of shred, so we'll clean that out and get this thing all nice. As you can see here, the plastic or the rubber section is just falling apart, so knocking out 2 birds with 1 stone here, and we'll get this thing dialed in. Oh my god guys, this freaking crank seal has been a real pain in the butt. Like I said, everything on this car is so rusty. I've got it like snipped here. It's literally like coming out in pieces. I'm gonna have to break it in half and potentially push part of it through the back because it just doesn't want to come through. Snip this thing. As you can see, it's already broken. And I guess we'll just have to push the rest through the back. And we ended up pulling the oil pump pickup. Checking out the oil pump inside of here. Everything's looking okay. Nothing blocking the oil pump. There was quite a bit of stuff inside the oil pickup. We've gone ahead and cleaned all that out. So we've gone ahead and cleaned the oil pickup really well. There should be nothing left inside of there. We've scrubbed it from both sides. And we'll get our new oil pan gasket and our oil pan that's been cleaned back on the car and torque it down to 10 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. All right guys, the oil pan is looking beautiful. We've given it a final cleaning. We've wiped down the mating surface. We're ready to grab our new oil pan. All right guys, the oil pan is now clean, looking beautiful inside and out. We've given it a final wipe down with some brake cleaner on the mating surface and just made sure she's good. But it's looking so much better. We're gonna go ahead, put our new oil pan gasket on. There's our old one. Put the new one on and put it in the car. We've got some brand new hardware here for the oil pan, so be sure to do that as well. We're gonna be replacing all the hardware, putting the subframe back in. So without further ado, let's get to it. Okay guys, quick little tip. If you're doing this alone and you've got a bunch of stuff to move out of the way like I do, you can zip tie the gasket to the oil pan just loosely so you can get a couple bolts in it. And then once you get a couple bolts in it and it hanging, then you cut the zip ties, pull them out of the way, put all the bolts in it, suck them all the way down, torque it to 10 or 8 Newton meters, and do your additional 90 or 180 degrees depending on which bolts, The 5 back bolts are going to be 180 degrees. The rest of them are 90 degrees. So let's get to it. All right, guys, the oil pan is in and tight. It's time to do the final torque. We got to do the 8 Newton meters and the 90 degrees all the way around and 180 in the back. So let's get it. All right, guys, as you just saw, I gave the engine a nice little cleaning. We've got our new water pump installed. We need to get our water pipe, which goes up there in that hole there, installed. We've got our new gaskets and O-rings on. I'm gonna lubricate this O-ring real quick with some grease and this right here, little Febby grease. Go ahead and install that pipe with our new connector to the water pump and get that all torqued into 10 Newton meters or 8 Newton meters with a little short hose here. So that'll go on here and complete that. So yeah, let's go ahead, put this little clamp on, put the hose in, and get this all together. All right, guys, subframe is in. We've got it torqued to 80 foot-pounds. We got to go ahead and put our oil level sensor in here with our new gasket that just arrived. We got to get some O-rings for these transmission lines here, replace those. All is looking good though. Motor mounts are tightened up. The water pump and thermostat are in, as well as our pipe that goes to the block here. With all new gaskets, we got to put the U-turn hose on and a few other hoses, start clicking in, get the front main seal in still, and then we can move on to install the belt, clean up the motor, maybe just slightly more, and put the radiator in and keep on going. Front main seal is in and looking beautiful. Time to get our crank pulley on and get all these hoses in. All right, guys, some progress has been made. We've got the suspension all back in and torqued to 175 Newton meters. We did get the water pump and all corresponding hoses in, as well as the new radiator. Unfortunately, the camera died, and so we just had to jam and put everything together, but all of the new heater core hoses, crossover line, basically everything is done. The crank pulley's been torqued, crank seal's been put in. Next step is to just fill this thing with oil and put some coolant in her and just double check everything for leaks. Give this thing a final wipe down. Some of these spots that are just still kind of messy. I do need to throw my hardware on the sway bar and the end links still. Those are loose. One of the last things down below, as well as just getting a lot of these plastic panels in, but for the most part, this job is done. It's been a real pain in the butt. So much cleaning and just... All right, guys, it is officially time to do the first start. I'll give you a quick look at everything. All the air boxes and everything is installed. The vacuum hoses are all hooked up. The 3-stage intake is in. All of the new seals and gaskets and oil filters and everything is in. Cooling system is complete. She's topped off. Engine is topped off with 7 quarts of fresh oil. And all is looking good. Be sure to run the car, give it a good once over. Everything seems to be plugged in and ready to go. So without further ado, let's give this thing its first start. Whew. All right, guys. Oh, we gotta put the key in. Oh yeah. Purrs like a kitten. She just fired right up. No issues. And little smoke from whatever, maybe that exhaust valves or valve seals, intake valve seals, something like that. But anyways, it sounds good. Sounds decent. Coolant's getting sucked down, so we'll continue to top that off. Make sure to get all this coolant in there. So we got a nice perfect 50-50 mixture. I ended up taking a gallon of each. There is an electric bleed process, but it'll do it on its own anyways here. Thankfully it's a little wobbly, isn't it? Anyways, Sometimes they're just a little wobbly. We'll go ahead, let this thing warm up. Wheels have been put on. We just got to bring it down and torque it. All the suspension is good, just giving everything a good once over for leaks and what we would expect after replacing the complete cooling system. No oil leaks look like they're coming from the oil pan either. Everything looks great there. Still a little residual here on the back of the tranny that I'll give a quick wipe up to, but other than that, everything's looking great. The car does need some front control arm bushings, and to be honest, could probably use some rear control arm bushings as well. This car was definitely like an East Coast car because there's quite a bit of rust on stuff, as you can see here. But yeah, she's gonna live another day and hopefully have a long life after saving this engine. So, all right guys, heat shield is on. We were missing a couple spots here, so I threw some zip ties on it, put in as many screws as we possibly could. Everything is all buttoned up. Everything is great, no leaks. So we're gonna bring her down. We're gonna torque these wheels, take it for a test drive. I wanna see this thing rip around the road. Not that it's gonna be super fast or anything, but it's always a pleasure after doing such deep work on a car to kind of take it for a test drive. And so hopefully, all right guys, let's take this thing for its maiden voyage. Make sure everything feels good. New suspension components and a transmission service and maybe brake fluid and diff service, but other than that, this thing's actually in quite good shape now. The engine seems to be running quite well, although we didn't do a whole lot as far as engine performance, like who knows the state of the coil packs and spark plugs, but the engine does seem to run pretty well. Sensor while we're in there, so this thing is purring quite nicely. As you can see, the idle is real smooth, and just taking off from a stop, the car accelerates. Although, I know you guys probably prefer the modification stuff. Maintenance is critical, right? Even race cars need maintenance, and so don't overlook your maintenance, guys. It's huge, especially with these BMWs. Anyways, guys, I hope you like this type of content. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.